In the heart of the 18th century, the vast Russian Empire stretched across two continents, yet it remained a cultural enigma to the sophisticated courts of Western Europe. When Catherine II ascended to the throne in 1762, she inherited an empire caught between medieval traditions and modern aspirations. Born Princess Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst in Prussia, this foreign-born empress would spend the next 34 years reshaping Russia's destiny. Like her grandfather-in-law, Peter I, who had forcibly dragged Russia toward modernity decades earlier, Catherine possessed an unwavering vision. She dreamed of transforming her adopted homeland into a beacon of enlightened governance, where reason would triumph over superstition and culture would flourish alongside power. Catherine's education had been exceptional for a woman of her era. Her governess ensured that she became fluent in French, the language of art and diplomacy that opened doors to the intellectual salons of Europe. Night after night, young Catherine devoured books about the European Enlightenment, immersing herself in revolutionary ideas about governance, individual rights, and rational thought. Among all the philosophers and writers she studied, one name captured her imagination above all others: Voltaire. The great French writer and philosopher had long been fascinated by Russia, though he initially harbored doubts about whether a woman could truly govern an empire. Their correspondence began tentatively, but as Catherine demonstrated her intellectual prowess and political acumen, Voltaire's skepticism transformed into admiration. For 16 years, until his death in 1778, these two great minds exchanged letters that explored philosophy, politics, and the nature of enlightened rule. Catherine's relationship with another Enlightenment giant, Denis Diderot, revealed the depth of her commitment to transforming Russia into a cultural powerhouse. Diderot was the mastermind behind the Encyclopedia, that monumental compilation of human knowledge that challenged religious dogma and celebrated rational inquiry. When the Catholic Church forced Diderot to halt publication, Catherine boldly offered to have the entire encyclopedia published in Russia. Though the French editors ultimately declined, fearing the unknown, Catherine found another way to support the philosopher. When Diderot's fourth child was born and financial desperation forced him to sell his precious library, Catherine purchased the entire collection. Her condition was remarkable. The books would remain with Diderot until his death, and he would serve as the librarian of his own collection, receiving a salary from the Russian crown. This generous act sent a clear message to Europe that Russia valued scholarship and culture. In 1773, Diderot finally journeyed to St. Petersburg to meet the Empress who had saved his library and transformed his fortunes. As editor of the encyclopedia, Diderot believed it his sacred duty to counsel Catherine on governance. With the passion of a true idealist, he urged her to reform Russia immediately and adopt an English-style parliamentary system. Catherine listened patiently to his eloquent arguments, then responded with words that revealed her pragmatic wisdom. She thanked him sincerely for his guidance, but gently explained that he did not understand the complex reality of Russia. Her empire was not France, not England, not Prussia. It was a vast, diverse realm where change had to be implemented carefully, balancing ideals against the stubborn realities of power, tradition, and social hierarchy. This encounter perfectly captured Catherine's approach. Inspired by Enlightenment ideals but tempered by political realism, Catherine's greatest ambition found expression in a document she called the Nakaz, or instruction. For 2 years, she labored over this comprehensive revision of Russian law, working daily to craft what she considered her supreme contribution to her adopted homeland. The full title captured its scope: Instruction of Her Imperial Majesty Catherine II for the commission charged with preparing a project of a new code of laws. Published on the 30th of July, 1767, the Nakaz contained 526 articles divided into 20 chapters. It presented Catherine's vision of how Russia should be governed, drawing inspiration from Enlightenment thinkers while addressing Russia's unique circumstances. Before Catherine's reign, Russian law had been a chaotic patchwork. Different rulers had implemented contradictory regulations, and many of Peter I's reforms had never been properly recorded, lost to the confusion of bureaucratic neglect. Catherine saw the Nakaz as her opportunity to restore and expand Peter's modernizing vision. The second phase of Catherine's legal revolution was even more ambitious than writing the Nakaz itself. She summoned delegates from across her vast empire to form a legislative commission that would inform her about the hopes, needs, and grievances of the Russian people. 564 delegates arrived in Moscow, representing nobles, merchants, townspeople, and even peasants. Catherine granted them all an unprecedented gift. They would receive salaries during their service and complete immunity from punishment for their words. On the 30th of July, 1767, Moscow witnessed a spectacular procession as Catherine rode through the streets in a gilded carriage, arriving at the Kremlin for a religious ceremony. In the historic Palace of Facets, she received each delegate personally. Over several days, Prince Alexander Golitsyn, the vice-chancellor, read the entire nakaz aloud while the delegates listened. Then came their turn to speak, presenting petitions and complaints that ranged from trivial local matters to profound calls for reform. After 5 months in Moscow, Catherine moved the Legislative Commission to St. Petersburg in February of 1768, where the real work of reform faced its greatest challenges. The nobility presented clear demands. They wanted more power in local government and the right to engage in industry and commerce. Those descended from ancient families insisted on formal recognition, distinguishing them from newly created nobles. But the most explosive issue was serfdom itself. The chamber divided sharply between those defending the institution and those condemning it as morally bankrupt. Catherine privately harbored growing disgust for serfdom, viewing it as incompatible with Enlightenment principles. Yet when she witnessed the passionate fury with which nobles defended their right to own serfs, she retreated from confrontation. Her political instincts warned her that pushing too hard on this issue could destabilize her reign. She understood that her power ultimately rested on noble support, and that reality constrained even an enlightened empress. The Legislative Commission met for 18 months, and though no new comprehensive law code emerged from their deliberations, Catherine gained something invaluable: a deep understanding of her empire's social landscape. The Commission revealed that Russia's stability depended on maintaining the absolute authority of the monarch, while carefully managing the competing interests of different social classes. Catherine filed away thousands of petitions and complaints, using this information to shape future reforms. Her approach evolved. Rather than attempting revolutionary change all at once, she would implement reforms gradually, building on successful experiments while avoiding direct confrontation with entrenched interests. This pragmatic strategy would define her reform efforts for the remainder of her long reign. On the 17th of March, 1775, Catherine released a manifesto celebrating victory in the Russo-Turkish War. Along with announcing the end of hostilities, she canceled special war taxes and granted amnesty to criminals, deserters, and runaways. But this public gesture masked years of quiet work on administrative reform. Behind the scenes, Catherine had consulted with advisors including the Baltic noble Count Jacob Sivers and Prince Vyazemsky, the Procurator General. She studied successful administrative models from the Russian Baltic provinces, which followed German organizational principles. On the 2nd of November 1775, she unveiled a sweeping new statute for the administration of the provinces of the Russian Empire. The reform was breathtaking in scope. Russia's 25 provinces would be reorganized into 40 regions, each containing between 300,000 and 400,000 people. These regions would further divide into districts of 20,000 to 30,000 residents. This meant that for the first time, administrative offices would be within a day's ride of every town and village. Catherine's judicial reforms demonstrated her commitment to rational governance and humane justice. She established a complex hierarchy of courts: main civil and criminal courts, specialized courts for nobility including upper district and lower land courts, magistrate courts for townspeople, and summary courts for peasants. Most revolutionary was the Court of Conscience, which handled sensitive cases including sexual offenses, accusations of witchcraft, and matters of mental competency. These courts operated across all social classes, breaking down some traditional barriers. Catherine modernized policing by establishing town provosts who commanded small armed units and land commissars who functioned like justices of the peace. She created boards of social welfare that established schools, hospitals, workhouses, houses of correction, and almshouses. In 1782, her police ordinance outlined regulations for maintaining public order, hygiene, moral standards, fire prevention, labor markets, and food distribution. Catherine's approach to criminal punishment reflected Enlightenment principles of prevention and proportion rather than brutal retribution. She ordered that men and women be kept separate in prisons, as were the convicted and those awaiting trial. Rebellious prisoners faced confinement in punishment cells rather than corporal punishment. Catherine believed that preventing crime was superior to punishing it, and she advocated for penalties proportionate to offenses. Those who destroyed property should lose their own property, she reasoned. Torture, that medieval holdover, earned her particular condemnation. She insisted that judges should sometimes be of equal social standing to defendants to ensure fairness. Catherine's creation of dedicated prisons and houses of correction for petty crimes represented a genuine modernization of Russia's penal system, moving away from arbitrary cruelty toward systematic justice. The plague epidemic that devastated Moscow in 1771 exposed the desperate need for medical infrastructure throughout Russia. Catherine responded by mandating that each province maintain a doctor, surgeon, apprentices, surgical assistants, and an apothecary. Hospitals were built in Moscow in 1767, and another named in Catherine's honor opened in 1775. The Empress personally specified strict guidelines. Hospital rooms required fresh air and clean bed sheets, and bells and water jugs must be placed at every bedside. The boards of social welfare received 15,000 rubles each and relied on donations from local nobles and merchants to fund hospitals, prisons, workhouses, and assistance for the poor. These boards represented Russia's first genuine attempt at organized social welfare, acknowledging government responsibility for citizens' basic well-being. Catherine's approach to religion revealed her complex balancing act between personal skepticism and political necessity. Though she had converted to Russian Orthodoxy upon arriving in Russia, she remained fundamentally secular in outlook. She suppressed protests against the Church while promoting Christianity, offering monetary rewards for conversions to Russian Orthodoxy. Yet she also promoted tolerance. The Toleration of Faiths Edict of 1773 allowed Muslims to build mosques and practice their religion freely. Catherine treated Judaism as a separate legal and administrative system, and in 1782, the Charter of the Towns granted Jewish populations equal status with Orthodox Christians. She removed religious instruction from state education in 1786, separating church and state in daily governance. Catherine walked a delicate line. She could not completely abandon religion without alienating powerful conservative forces, but she refused to let religious authority constrain her modernizing reforms. Catherine's economic reforms demonstrated her practical approach to modernization. She invited German farmers to settle in the Volga River Valley, where they introduced innovations including advanced wheat production techniques, sheep raising, efficient flour milling, and tobacco cultivation. These German settlers transformed the Volga Valley into an economic powerhouse. Catherine also modernized Russia's monetary system by establishing the Assignation Bank in 1769, which issued paper money called assignation rubles. These notes gradually replaced cumbersome copper coins, facilitating trade and commerce. The assignation rubles remained in circulation until 1849, decades after Catherine's death, proving the durability of her economic innovations. Catherine understood that cultural and legal reforms meant nothing without economic prosperity to support them. Catherine believed passionately that all Russian children deserved a European-style education. She appointed Ivan Betsky as her educational reformer, charging him with comparing Russian and European educational systems. An educational commission formed with British pioneers Reverend Daniel Dumersk and Dr. John Brown contributing expertise. The commission designed an educational system for Russian Orthodox students between 5 and 18 years old. Catherine founded the Moscow Foundling Home for lower-class and illegitimate children, though it struggled with high mortality rates. More successful was the Smolny Institute for Noble Girls, Russia's first all-girls school, which eventually accepted both noble daughters and bourgeoisie girls who studied music, French, and dance. The Cadet Corps underwent complete remodeling in 1766, adding philosophy, science, history, ethics, and international law to the traditional military curriculum. In 1786, Catherine established the Russian Statute of National Education under statesman Pyotr Zavadovsky. A commission of national schools translated textbooks and created teacher guidebooks. The statute created a two-tier system of primary and high schools that were free and open to children of all classes except serfs' children. By her reign's end, approximately 62,000 students received education across Russia, a remarkable number given the empire's vast size and conservative culture. Yet Catherine faced criticism for insufficient investment in educational programs and her failure to extend education to peasant children. Many historians argue that this shortcoming prevented her from fully achieving educational reform. The exclusion of serfs' children from the educational system perpetuated the very social divisions that Enlightenment ideals condemned. The issue of serfdom remained Catherine's greatest moral and political challenge. Serfdom had existed in Russia long before her birth, with peasants surrendering their freedom to landowners in exchange for protection and security. Catherine made modest improvements. Serfs gained the right to file complaints against landowners, establishing bureaucratic status and a voice in the system. She made it illegal to re-enslave freed serfs and ordered freedom for those held under illegal ownership. Yet she also eliminated Peter I's act that had freed serfs belonging to the Russian Orthodox Church. Catherine understood that serfdom contradicted Enlightenment principles of human dignity and individual liberty. But she also knew that abolishing serfdom would provoke noble rebellion and potentially destroy her reign. This tension between ideals and political reality defined her approach to Russia's fundamental social structure. Catherine's passion for the arts equaled her dedication to political reform. She was not merely a patron but an active participant in cultural life, writing her own comedies and memoirs that earned praise from Voltaire and Diderot themselves. In 1764, she founded the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, which celebrates its founding every year on the 7th of December, St. Catherine's Day. She reformed the Imperial Academy of Arts, which oversaw all artistic matters in Russia. Catherine established the Imperial Russian Library near the Winter Palace, acquiring entire collections from notable Europeans, including Italian archaeologist Berardo Gallieni and French mathematician Jean-Laurent D'Alembert. Her particular love for books on art and architecture inspired building commissions, including Chesme Palace in St. Petersburg and the Raphael Loggia in the Hermitage Museum. Under her patronage, Russian arts flourished as never before. Catherine's reign witnessed the birth of the Russian intelligentsia, a new class of educated Russians who attended universities, learned foreign languages, traveled abroad, and wrote stories and plays. They drew inspiration from their cultured and educated Empress, who proved that Russia could compete intellectually with any European nation. Catherine's role as Empress was remarkable considering she was not Russian by birth but a German princess who married into the royal family. Not all her reforms succeeded as she hoped. Serfdom remained, educational reforms fell short of universal coverage, and many compromises were made with political reality. Yet she transformed Russia's legal system, administrative structure, healthcare, education, and cultural life. Under her rule, Russia experienced its golden age of enlightenment. Following in the footsteps of Peter the Great, she modernized Russia and established it as equal to other European powers. When Catherine died in 1796 after 34 years on the throne, she left behind an empire fundamentally transformed, earning her place in history as Catherine the Great. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more fascinating historical content. See you in the next one.